Welcome, everyone, to the Sid Ammar Show. If you haven't already, make sure you check out our previous episodes available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. My YouTube channel is at Sid Ammar 316, so make sure you subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes. This is also my handle on Facebook and Twitter or X, so make sure you follow me. And if you're interested in life coaching services, you can follow me on Instagram using the same handle. Today's guest is Adib Kaddoura, who will be discussing stress management. Now, according to the Mayo Clinic, stress is defined as, quote, an automatic physical, mental, and emotional response to a difficult event. It's a common part of everyone's life. When used positively, stress can lead to growth, action, and change. But negative, long-term stress can lessen your quality of life, end quote. So Adib is an ICISF, International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management instructor. A lot of words there. He teaches psychological first aid and CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management, to correctional staff across Canada for the CSC, which is the Correctional Service of Canada. He teaches the CISM team on how to respond to traumatic incidents. Adib has been a correctional officer for 24 years. He has spent 2 years with professional corrections and 22 years with federal corrections. Hopefully, Adib, you can explain the difference between professional corrections and federal corrections for us. Adib has spent the majority of his career at the Edmonton institution known as the MAX, which is a maximum security federal institution. Adib also serves as the CIS team lead at the prison. So I asked Adib to join us today, as I believe that mental and psychological health and stress management are critical to our everyday lives and well-being. So without further ado, welcome, Adib.
Hello, Sid. Thank you for having me.
Anything else you'd like to add to that intro that I may have missed?
A couple of things. It's provincial corrections, not not professional corrections. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Provincial corrections, no problem.
And the difference between the two, believe it or not, it's actually very simple. If you get sentenced to 2 years less a day in Canada, you go provincial corrections.
Oh, wow.
If you get sentenced to 2 years plus a day, you go federal corrections. So in Canada, nobody will ever receive a 2-year sentence. It's either 2 years less a day or 2 years plus a day. So,
oh, that's really neat. I never knew that. And yes. That's for like any type of crime you may be sentenced to?
It doesn't matter. The sentence determines, people say, oh, you get the worst guy or the good guy or whatever. It's literally the length of the sentence that determines which are you going to go to a provincial facility or a federal facility. That is the single difference.
Excellent. Excellent. Adib, I wanted to start off by just asking you, how do you define stress management? What is it exactly, and why is it important?
First, actually, if it's okay, I'm going to break down stress, and then we go into stress management, if that's okay.
No problems. Go right ahead.
So there's usually, stress comes from a lot of things, events in our lives, memories, all those things. We always say one's own perception becomes their own reality. So sometimes we experience one event with 10 other people. All of a sudden, I'm stressed out and it really bothers me, but it doesn't bother the other 9 people. So we always want to look at, why is it bothering that person, and why is it having that stressful reaction to that single person? And that's what that stress is now. The stress word itself, believe it or not, in the 60s comes from a physicist who moved over to psychology, and he took it away from stressing metal and brought it over to the psychology world, actually. So there's a fact of the day, I guess, for somebody to win a.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so that's where stress comes from. Now, what we deal with is, within stress management, and everybody, I'm sure, can attest to this, there's 3 different types of stresses, believe it or not. There's chronic stress, which is normal, everyday, today stress, which is kind of the normal. We're going to go, up and down a little bit, start off the day, maybe get a bill, the traffic stress. This is going to be what's called chronic stress, and it stays usually within a parameter of this, right? So it doesn't go any extreme, which is normal. You know what I mean? Everybody has this normal kind of stress, and stress is, like you said earlier, does help growth, actually. Just like physical fitness, stressing our mind is the same as stressing muscles. It helps growth. The next one we're going to talk about is what's called is acute stress. Now we're going more to the extreme events. These are events that don't happen quite often in our lives, but these are the extreme events.
So more traumatic events, right?
Exactly. This is partly we're entering the trauma zone. And believe it or not, at one time, a trauma was defined as an out of the human experience. But believe it or not, trauma is a very human experience because many people experience abuse. They see trauma throughout their lives repeatedly. Again, more first responders, healthcare nurses experience a lot of that stuff. But the way we look at it, sometimes we dismiss it, but we do experience. If I perceive the incident to be traumatic, it is traumatic because it is the way I interpret it.
Yeah.
So that is acute stress. So now what happens is we go outside that limit, and now we're going way higher than the usual. Now, what happens usually after that is remember physics? Again, we're going to pick on physics for a minute. For every action, there's a equal
An
and
opposite
opposite
reaction.
reaction. So usually after that traumatic event, we go higher, then we go lower, much lower. So we kind of crash. And that is when we begin to enter kind of the depression territory. That is why people kind of get depressed, get down on themselves. They no longer, because remember, in the stress, you get excited, right? You get into that fight or flight aspects, into survival mode. But then when we crash, we enter that depression territory. We want to isolate. We want to shut down. We don't want to be around anything exciting, actually. We want to be in a corner in a basement. So now, again, like we explained, that is acute stress. The third stress is, and this is the dangerous stress, is post-traumatic stress. And this is where really the trauma comes in.
So PTSD, basically.
No, we're not. If the PTS is prolonged or intense, it could lead to PTSD.
Okay.
But and that's exactly what stress management is. And I'll get to that in a second. But I'll explain what PTS, and then we'll get to stress management because it kind of links into one. So PTS is the extreme event. At the traumatic event happened, we entered acute stress. But what happened is we even go a step higher with that. And now we are in the excited phase all the time, every time. We can't sleep at night. I don't know if you've ever seen this. When somebody goes through something really traumatic, they're pacing, they're excited, and they're excited for days and days. And if they stay, again, you'll see this with soldiers and law enforcement because they're continuously exposed to traumatic events. What happens? Remember earlier with acute stress, we talked about the crash. If you don't crash, what happens? We stay at a higher level, and we stay there, and we stay there. And the longer we stay there, that is what could lead to PTSD. And that is where stress management comes in to help you come down to a normal level.
Like to an equilibrium, to a midpoint, right?
To balance the equilibrium, exactly. Because as long as we stay in that heightened state, we now our bodies become almost used to it, and that's where PTSD kicks in, because our bodies now seek that stress, seek the thrill of that stress. They want it. They want it. It almost becomes accustomed to living with it, and that will lead to PTSD at that point because we're so thrilled by it, and we can no longer function without stress. That's why you've noticed stressful people seek out stressful situations and stressful friends. You'll see this a lot of times with those folks that they will seek
That's
out.
very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, they will seek all those relationships. So people who are almost, will say, I hate to use this word, but almost a bit toxic, will seek out toxic relationships.
Yes.
You'll see both partners being toxic. You'll notice their circle of friends is quite chaotic. So they begin to see, and they begin to only, and people who have the chronic stress can no longer relate to those people because those people always are go, go, go. They're the people that want to they're the ones that want to drive fast. They're the ones that have road rage. They're the ones that snap at the stores for no reason, literally over minor things. So
these are highly stressed people in this state.
And that is this is what we're talking, they're always that way. I'm sure there's people in your life that we all have that PTS, they're always high up all the time, every time. So
Excellent.
So that's stress. So what stress management is, it's to stop that stress from continuing and to help balance your equilibrium it is psychological first aid. It is no different than physical first aid. So if somebody's really injured, and again, they are very similar, believe it or not. So if you come across somebody who's bleeding, do we just stand there and let them bleed?
No.
Exactly. We want to put a Band-Aid on, right?
Yeah.
So same with psychological first aid. What you want to do is we say literally apply the Band-Aid, but a psychological Band-Aid. Whether you talk to them, whether you want to give them some activities, because a lot of them forget the healthy activities. They forget to live healthy. They forget to eat healthy. Now they also with stress, you begin to see junk because your body's is dumping a lot of cortisol and dopamine into your body. So your body needs energy. So your body begins to crave sugars and fatty food because it's a survival mechanism. Believe it or not, our bodies haven't evolved in 100,000 years. So our bodies go back into survival mode and they seek that. So instead of going back to eating healthy, so what stress management does says, hey, eat healthy, try to get some sleep, seek out some informal help. And again, it is not therapy. It is not a substitute for therapy. It is just psychological first aid to help maybe bring a person down a lot quicker, just
So,
with the proximity.
so stress management, you can define it as a psychological type of first aid.
That's exactly what it is, nothing more.
Okay. In your experience, from what you've seen, what has been reported as the greatest sources of stress? What would you say?
Again, there's what could be defined as horrific events, including blood, gore, events, especially with law enforcement involving children, a lot of those things. An interesting stat is the average person will witness 2 traumatic events in their life, believe it or not. That's the average person. But the average law enforcement officer will experience 500 traumatic events or more.
Wow.
Right? So that's kind of our target because they experience a lot of trauma. They will witness horrific events that you see on the news. Even myself, I always joke around that I work in a place in correctional service where people watch movies and documentaries about this. A police officer, that is their line of work. An emergency nurse, right? Like we watch these TV shows. So some of these folks, this is a daily reality, not something we see on the movies, right? So
Yeah.
that's where this comes in.
Wow. I have some information here from the APA. I just wanted to read through, and I wanted to get your feedback on it.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So this is according to the American Psychological Association. Psychological science has revealed that long-term stress creates risks for a variety of mental health challenges, may make us feel more sensitive even to daily hassles, can have broader impacts on our general life outlook and goals, and affects the body's physiological response to stressors in ways that have notable implications for our physical health. Coping with long-term stress requires a different set of skills than adjusting to temporary stress. Stress puts the body on high alert, and ongoing stress can accumulate, causing inflammation, like something physical, wearing on the immune system, and increasing the risk of a host of ailments, including digestive issues, heart disease, weight gain, stroke, etc.
And that is very true. And this is actually recently I went to a talk, and this was really talked about. So with stress itself, what it does, it dumps cortisol into the body, and that cortisol begins to really pump sugar into the bloodstream. And that's one of the reasons they say diabetes is the silent killer of law enforcement, actually. And then those things could lead to weight gain, obesity, heart disease, the high blood pressure, strokes, all those things. So it starts off with the stress causing a lot of those things. So within stress management, it's funny because there's the cognitive, emotional, physical, and spiritual stresses. So with the cognitive, right, we're not able to think properly, literally get our clear our ways of cognitively thinking. Then you got the emotions, exactly what we talked about, snapping, getting angry a lot quicker, not able to control our emotions because the trauma, literally, as it takes over the brain, it begins to control those emotions a lot quicker. And that's why, if you notice, people who have been through a lot of trauma, especially people from third world countries, people that have been born into wars, you can't almost, you can't joke around with them a lot. There's a different way they look at life. They're triggered a lot easier.
That makes sense, yeah.
And this is actually an interesting fact, and I'll kind of throw it out right now, is trauma could live into our bodies up to 7 generations. So
How
trauma,
so?
Yeah, so
Like
trauma does not,
genetically?
what's that?
How?
Genetically, yeah.
Okay, go into it. Yeah, I'm
So
interested
yeah,
to know
so
more.
trauma does not just it doesn't end with you after you witness the traumatic incident or you deal with it. Again, as you deal with it, just like physical matters, trauma could heal that way. But
Yeah.
going back to what stress does also physically, exactly, there's weight gain, there is pain. Sometimes people who have stress will have the stress will live in their body, believe it or not, and it'll hide in their body somewhere, and maybe it'll hide in their shoulder, and they'll go to their doctors. They're like, my shoulder's bothering me, and they'll do an MRI and they'll do a CAT scan on the shoulder. There is nothing. It's kind of weird. Like they can't figure out what that pain is. And a lot of times when those folks go on vacation, that pain goes away. But the moment
Wow.
they return back to their normal life, that pain is back because they're back into
Wow.
that stressful environment.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So with the physical aspects, also you got disturbed sleep. People who have a lot of stress will tell you they cannot sleep. That is a huge thing. Sleep is actually the biggest healer for mental, physical, emotional things, believe it or not. Sleep has been proven to be probably the best. After sleep and exercise have been proven to be probably the best physical pills out there. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but people with stress, they have that, they're not able to sleep. And believe it or not, NASA will not take you on as an astronaut if you cannot get 8 hours of straight uninterrupted sleep.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
you
shows
need to
you,
be in top physical shape
well, top
for
physical shape, but
NASA.
also the ability to sleep for 8 hours. And
Yeah.
that's kind of becomes the standard to show you that how important sleep is.
Yeah.
So with other physical aspects, we begin to kind of, like we talked about this a quick, the weight gain, the heart disease, a lot of those things, right? The physical pain. But even sexual activities with our partners, right? Either we shut down or we become risk takers. So, and that's a very interesting one also. That either we isolate ourselves from our partners and we don't want to be involved, or we become really risk takers and quite promiscuous. We begin to take risks.
Mhm.
And the last one is going to be the spiritual aspects. We either become extremely religiously fanatical and we become, like we take religious beliefs to a whole new level, or we almost become anti-religion.
Yeah.
And with this one, it's going to be very interesting because you'll see this also people who believe in conspiracy theories and who are very anti-science,
Yeah.
they really take this on. And usually if you talk to them, they've been through a lot of stress because they begin to question a lot of, you know what I mean? We call this partly moral injury. So they begin to question a lot of their beliefs, a lot of why am I even here? Right? I'd be better off dead, right? You know what I mean? So the government's out to get me. So they become extremely paranoid. You'll see them, stockpiling food and stockpiling their lives to always live that way.
So you're saying one of the reasons why people sometimes go into hardcore religious fundamentalism and then the opposite of it is due to the stress, the consistent daily stress factors in their lives.
That's 100%. And you'll see that it's been, fanatical terrorists or anybody from a fanatical group they've been interviewed.
Yeah.
There's always a traumatic event throughout their life that triggers them to join that movement or to begin to believe that way. You once you begin to really break it down, there's always a fundamental traumatic event that really defined that point where they became that extreme.
Do you find that these types of people also have a lot of anger inside? Like highly stressed people seem to
Huge.
be very, very angry and cannot seem to let go or forgive or
Well,
in a healthy way let go of that anger.
so we're going to go back to trauma for a quick second, and this is kind of will lead into this.
Okay.
So what trauma does, it rewires the brain. As a survival mechanism. So for the brain to deal with the trauma itself, it either has to accept the trauma and move on, or what it does, it has to find a resolution. Those are the two only ways. Without that, the trauma lives in the brain. And as the brain begins to kind of struggle with the trauma, you'll notice a lot of anger because that trauma is there in the brain all the time. And you'll see a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. Nothing is making sense. What used to be simple is no longer simple. The big thing with the rewiring of the brain can never rewire back. It learns how to move on. It learns to rewire and move on. The thing is, they begin to miss who they were prior to the traumatic incident. and
Because
they
of all the rewiring going on outside
yes.
in the
And
brain.
so what they will say, I miss who I was. I
Okay.
miss the old Sid. I miss the old Adib. Oh man, I used to be a funny guy.
Yeah.
And that now, that's where the anger really comes in now, because it's a part of the grief. It's almost, we're going to say it is a loss. There was a loss, actually, believe it or not. And now there's a sense of grief, because with that loss, there's almost like a death. Like, I miss the old Adib, man. I used to
Like
be
the
a
death of the old you, you know?
yes. And they almost, until, like I said, we've accepted the trauma and moved on, you miss it. Man, I used to be a happy guy. I used to be outgoing. I used to be funny. And you'll see this also with people who almost age, right? You see people who are 40, 50. Man, my 20s, right? What do we talk about? Right?
Yeah.
We reminisce. There's a
Yeah.
difference between reminiscing and remembering, but there's a difference of really missing it. Man, the youth, right? Man,
Yeah.
when I was 18, I used to be up all night. I used to do this and I used to do that. Same with the trauma. I used to be happy. I used to trust people, because also with trauma, we really become very paranoid. We don't really trust anything anymore. Right? I used to trust people. I used to be happy. I used to enjoy food. I don't enjoy food anymore. So you'll see a lot of that.
So it's safe to say that anger itself, or the people in that state of anger, is usually a response to some sort of trauma trigger or trauma situation they have experienced before.
Exactly. They also could be living in that trauma, like I said, and that trauma has never been resolved. So that trauma hasn't been resolved yet, and it's still living there. And again, it's what's funny about mental health is a lot of people, if I have physical pain, if I break my arm, I go see a doctor and I deal with it, and I get it to heal. With the stigma of mental health, a lot of people don't deal with their trauma, right? It's whether it's cultural, whether it's personal, whether it's, so a lot of times people don't seek that help, and that point becomes quite essential. Is a lot of people are not seeking that help. It doesn't have to be formal help. It could be informal. It could be with a spiritual leader. It could be through faith groups. It could be through a friend. It could be through
Wow.
life coaching.
Yeah.
But it could be psychiatric, professional, social workers. So I'm not dismissing therapy is a huge essential part, tool of this, but there's so many tools, but nobody seeks that. And then people say, well, am I crazy? And then they begin to think that way. And then again, that the trauma now thrives because
It will close them down, right? Not make them want to share it.
it shuts you down. It has isolated you, and it has won. And so it's kind of funny that, again, physical trauma, we seek help. Right now, if you have a broken leg, what do I say to you? Let's go to the hospital.
Go to the hospital, right?
What are you doing sitting at home?
Yeah.
But with psychological trauma, again, we have our own stigma. We have personal self-stigma, and we have societal stigma.
Yes.
So you have two things happening. You don't have one thing happening on one end. You have actually two things happening. We stigmatize ourselves. And sometimes I always say, nobody cares about you. That was one of my favorite lines, because in our heads, oh, what is Sid going to think? And what's my buddy going to think? And what's my family think? I always say, nobody really cares about you. Go get the help you need.
You have to care about yourself. You have to be proactive.
Yeah. But then there's the societal stigma.
Yes.
Oh, did you hear about Sid? Did you hear about this guy?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I heard he's gone off the deep end, right? So even the wording in our society does have to change. We have to welcome people seeking help. And that is a big one. That is, he's not crazy. He's just going through some stuff. Let us help him.
Yes.
Right? Trauma
it's like trying to understand the other and put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Exactly. So instead of, dismissing and making fun and all, and even our wording, even amongst our friends, oh, that guy's crazy.
Yeah.
That guy's going through some stuff. And again, 25% of society struggles with mental illness. That is one of 4 people. If there's 4 people in a room, one of them has a mental illness. This is, again, we're not saying this is mental illness, but this is a struggle, right? And we need to start changing our language. So when people seek out for help, they always say you have to hit rock bottom for you to seek help. You don't have to break every bone in your body for you to seek help.
Yeah.
So why, with mental health, I have to hit rock bottom for me to seek help?
Yeah. Why don't you be proactive and seek it in advance?
Or when you break one bone, like I said, you don't have to hit fully on. I said, I don't have to break every bone in my body.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah,
because over time, it'll affect you.
Yeah, and the other one I'm going to pick on, and this is the societal aspects, the societal stigma, is people say if you need help, reach out. But the problem is
Do they
people,
even really mean it? You know, when people
and
say
that's
that,
exactly.
right?
Oh, are they even trained to recognize the signs? And this is exactly where I come in. I teach the rook for the signs. I don't want what to do when you see the signs, because exactly I could say, said having a really bad day. Oh well, let's go for a walk. Okay, and I go for a walk, and that's it. We dismiss it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you really didn't hear my words,
yeah.
if that makes any sense.
I
So
got you.
what's going on? Is everything? I'm having a bad day. What's going on? Is everything okay? No, and that could be a conversation starter, if that makes any sense. So sometimes
Yeah.
listen again. The big thing we say is listen, 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 right? And in life, it's you have to learn. We have to learn to listen to learn, right?
Well, that's why some people say like, you know, God gave you two ears and one mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak, right?
Exactly. And a lot of us love to use this more than these, but
Yeah.
that's exactly it. And so when somebody tells you, "Hey, I need help," and especially somebody tells you you need mental health help,
Yeah.
oh God, crap, I'm out of here, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's God's will, or
Yeah.
I'm going to pick an Arab culture. Oh, it's the demons possessing
Yeah.
somebody. It's a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not dismissing and making fun of. Actually, I'm just being quite
But
serious.
there could be psychological
And
causes
it's
like you're
huge,
talking
like I
about,
said, and
and
that's
we need to be
exactly
more
it.
open.
And again, if you come to me and you say, "Hey, I have, you know, diabetes," I say, "Well, here, let me read some phrases for you from the Holy Book, and
Yeah.
let's do a Hail Mary." No,
Yeah.
go get treated, right?
Yeah. Well, there's knowledge and action. It's a combination. It's knowledge and action. I
Uh,
wanted to read this to you, Eddie, because you touched on a point I was gonna bring up, which is perfect. This is again from the APA. It says, when it comes to stress management, many are struggling to cope and are bearing the burden alone. Around 3 in 5 adults, 62% said they don't talk about their stress overall because they don't want to burden others. Although finances are a top stressor, talking about them is off the table. In fact, only 52% of adults said they are comfortable talking with others about money and finances, and more than 2 in 5 adults, 45%, said they feel embarrassed talking about money or their financial situation with others. Again, people are afraid to share their psychological state with others.
yeah, and that shows you a huge one. And believe it or not, again, a recent study I even read, and this is post-COVID, 70% of people are reporting burnout. So
Yes.
they're exhausted, they're tired, right? But exactly, and we are good human beings, and the sad thing about it, we don't want to we don't want to burden others with our problems. We are helpers. Human beings are, as we are helpers. We want to help. So if I have a problem, I'm not going to call you, tell you, "Hey man, I'm having a bad day. Could you just come sit beside me for half an hour?" I, I don't want to burden you with that. So I could be having the worst day of my life, and you say, "How are you?" What's your typical response? Good.
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, right? And boom, do you
Yeah.
notice how with that, do you see how you turned it around?
Yeah.
So you took the burden, and now you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of us, we will not seek that help. We want to be the helpers. We want to be the givers. Yeah, and the sad thing, like you said, up to 50% or more don't want to talk about problems, finance, anything they're struggling with, burnout, depression. Again, and I'm not saying these have to be long-term mental illnesses. These could be short-term. You know what I mean? So it's funny, what we're very willing to talk about are the pain in my knee and the pain in my shoulder, but what about the pain in our brain, which is the
Yeah, it's almost like people view it as an embarrassment, which is really, isn't there something off about that? Like we're willing to talk about, okay, I hurt my leg, I broke my leg, but
yeah.
something, is bothering me psychologically or whatever, and we don't want to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely not. Because, well, again, part of it is stigma, part of it is embarrassment, and part of it is I don't want to be a burden. So it's a kind of a combination of all three. So the stigma, again, I'm Arab, right? You're Arab. The stigma in the Arab community. Oh my God, what are the communities going to say about me,
Exactly. I
right?
think that's
Oh
not
my,
not a great thing
they're
that
going to say we're crazy. He comes
communities.
from the
Yeah.
crazy family, right?
Yeah.
That's cultural stigma. The
Yeah.
other one, again, I'm an officer. What are people going to think about me? I wear my uniform on. I put my gun on. I put my, you know what I mean, my badge on. I'm an officer. I can't show weakness. Guess what? You're human. You're not the uniform. Below that uniform is a human being. So
Yes.
that's the second stigma. Then you got the embarrassment. Well, what are they going to think about me? Is Sid going to be my friend anymore after? Is he going to hang out with me after? So that stigma now begins to really kick in. And the third one is I don't want to burden Sid. I don't really want to be that person that puts all of my problems on the table, because also we've seen this when we ask for mental health help. It's almost like it's almost like somebody. Okay, I'm going to go back to the physical analogy. If somebody has a broken leg, what do you say? Do you say walk it off? No, you say rest it, get help, get and heal. Right.
Yeah.
With the problem with mental health, we've seen this before. Is yeah, man, I'm having a really bad day and I'm depressed. Well, why don't you go for a walk? Well, thanks, genius. I never thought about that. I don't want to go for a walk. I'm depressed.
You want to address the root cause, but
Exactly. But see,
you may
again,
not be sure how to get to the root cause to address it.
and exactly our intention is that our intention is good, but we said the wrong thing. So I don't want to burden you. Hey, Sid, I'm really having a down day, and I just don't want to talk. You know what? Sometimes the best thing to say, I'll sit beside you and we can be quiet for 30 minutes. And that's it.
That's
Or we
true.
say, oh, you're having a bad day. Let's go get wings and let's go for a walk and let's watch a movie. I don't want any of this. So that burden aspect now begins, and the aspect of what people have done to us before kind of make us like, I don't want to tell anybody, because they're just going to dismiss me and say, well, do this and let's eat some chips and we'll feel better, right? That's, again, with a physical analogy, you have a broken leg. We understand that, but with mental health, we almost don't understand that.
Wow. I want to share this with you again, just to add to what we're saying. Again, from the APA, right? So it says 6 things researchers want you to know about stress. Number 1, stress can manifest in the body. Number 2, physical effects of stress can be damaging even when you appear fine on the outside. 3, effects don't end when the stressful experience ends. 4, social support is good for everyone. 5, some coping mechanisms don't suffice in unbearable situations. And number 6, you need stress and often grow from it. What's your thoughts on that? Especially point number 6, you need stress and often grow from it.
100%.
Yeah.
So we've hit on most of these points already, actually,
Yeah.
which is kind of awesome that we're perfectly in line with them. But again, people, you do physical fitness, right? So
Yeah.
what do you do with your muscles when you work out really heavy? You stress the muscle.
Yeah.
Your muscle will not grow unless you give it stress. Guess what? With your brain, it will not. Why do we? You remember when you went to school and you studied? You stressed yourself out. So
You're kind of stressing your brain when you study, right?
100%. And same with other kinds of growth. And that is why it's kind of funny that the 2-year-old will throw the temper tantrum over a yellow and a green cup, because to them that is stressful. And remember, one's own perception is their own reality.
Yeah.
So for them to grow, again, I hate to say that you have to go through stress to grow, but what's kind of interesting is it does, if done properly, you will grow from stress. Just like physical fitness. Again, you could do physical fitness wrong and actually injure yourself.
Depends what you do with it, right?
Exactly. So we have to be very careful with that line, actually, that yes, stress does help growth, but only when done, and the healing is done properly after. And the problem is a lot of us don't heal properly. And I'm going to actually touch on this point now, because what's happening now with our society is we all have little magical devices. So guess what these devices do? These devices keep us on a high. So remember before with the acute stress or the chronic stress, which is up and down? So guess what happened?
Yeah.
I hit that high.
And
As
it
I'm
keeps you on there?
crashing, guess what I go to? I go to my magical little device. It gives me dopamine and it keeps me up, right? And I go to crash again and I go to bed and I wake up in the middle of the night and I go on it. Or I wake up in the morning and I go on it all the time. And I check it. I just look at it, gives me that shot of dopamine. So guess what happens? We are not able to grow anymore because we're not able to have the crash. Because for us, again, physical fitness for a second, you work out. What happens after you work out a day or two? You get sore, right? That's the crash. So if we're not getting the crash with stress, we're not getting the growth. So we need the crash to kind of calm ourselves down, process the actual critical event, and then growth. One thing I'm going to hit on, and this is with stress management, is we don't target the critical incident itself. Does that make sense? The critical incident, the car accident, the horrific event itself, we do not target that. We target the psychological response. So this is very important. Does that make sense? So
you target the response symptoms, like what happens.
The psychological aspect.
Yeah.
So let's say again, especially again, because I teach this to mostly law enforcement, we don't deal with the operational aspects. We don't do an operational briefing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I come to see you as stress management, I don't sit there and I go over through, oh my God. And again, I'll use the car crash scenario. You were involved in a car crash. Oh my God, that was a crazy car crash. Said, oh, how big was the crash? How fast were you guys going? Within stress management, we do not target the critical, we call that the critical event or the critical incident. We target the how are you feeling? We don't target the car accident. We target your psychological response. And that becomes essential to what we do as stress management peers.
So I'm curious. Just a theoretical situation. Let's say you're dealing with a police officer who's first day on the job and he saw someone get shot.
Yeah.
You know, he's never been through that before. That incident itself is a traumatic incident.
Yeah.
So let's say you're brought in to help the police officer. How would you help him out? What kind of things would you help him out with? What would you focus on? And not the event itself, but what post event.
It is post event, so that's the thing. We have to ensure that the event is over. That is number one. That is we cannot do stress management as long as the event is ongoing. So the event has to be over. You want to remove them out of the event if possible. Again, this is psychological first aid. We have a few rules. We pretend we have 15 minutes. It could be 20 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. We always want to introduce ourselves, why we are there, and we have to set limitations. We say this is not therapy. Again, it's not a substitute for therapy. Also, if they tell us that they're going to, self-harm or whatever, we have to report that by law. That is not up to us. Second is we want to hear their story. We are not going to again, we don't target the critical incident, but we're not going to dismiss that either. I don't want to hear it. No, we want to hear their side of the story. But sometimes they'll say, well, you know why you're here. Like somebody called you. You didn't just show up, right?
Yeah.
But we want to hear it from them. We want to hear their side of the story. Yeah. But then we want to see what their psychological reaction is. And that's the most important thing. Sometimes, I'll be honest with you, people's own resilience is excellent. They've been through enough psychological events in their life that their own, we call it body armor, actually, psychological body armor.
They can manage
their own psychological body armor kicks in, and that's, you know what, you're good enough to go. If not, if they're exhibiting some of the symptoms where, we talked about earlier, physical pain or emotional distress or dysfunction, at that point, we'll see if we can get them help. Sometimes we also offer suggestions, right? Make sure tonight you go for a walk, play with that dog. Because when you're in that stressful situation, remember the trauma is taking over, you want to give those suggestions, and that is what people are listening to. They're listening to you. So tell them, say, hey, Sid, you like to play chess? Maybe play a game of chess tonight. You like to go for the walk? Go for the walk. So you have to find out what they like and tell them to do it, because they are actually listening to you at this point. They're genuinely listening to you. And the big one, and this is, again, as a friend, a lot of us miss this cue, is the follow-up aspect. Do we follow up with our friends? Right now, a friend of you comes to you and says, hey, man, I've had a really rough week and I'm really struggling. And again, you might help them that day. But what about the follow-up aspect?
The follow-up is important as well. It shows that you care, actually.
Well, you care, but sometimes also some other thoughts might have come into their heads after you leave. So that's the big one, is the follow-up aspects.
Like they might be thinking, oh, what did he think of me? And maybe he has a bad view of me right now. And
but also part of it is, okay, so the critical incident happened, Sid comes in, saves the day, right? Does the little quick chit chat, does the psychological first aid, and that person goes home. Well, that person is going to go home. They're going to put their head on the pillow and they're going to go to bed. But your brain is very interesting. At 2 a.m, your brain's going to wake up. It says, oh my God, I could have been shot. And your brain's now going to analyze everything over and over and over. And it's going to play every million scenarios possible. So the follow-up aspect is making sure that you're able to kind of calm them down and bring them back to some sort of normalcy, I guess I'm going to say. right? I'm going to say in reality, because reality is quite skewed for everybody. But that's why the follow-up, because and some people, again, I always joke that say they're psychopaths. They'll go home, put their head on the pillow, and go to sleep, and I got a good night's sleep. But a good, decent human being, they're going to question themselves. We always question ourselves, and that's actually healthy. And that's part of the growth that the American Psychological Association talks about, because we question ourselves, and that's how we get better, actually. So how do we get better from last time? And how do we get better next time, right? So that is the questioning ourselves and running it through our heads.
I often say you should be focusing on improving yourself every day. Even though we will never be perfect beings, I mean, we have the duty to seek that perfection. We must always be willing each and every single day to be like, I want to be a better person now than who I was yesterday, a better person this minute than who I was in the last minute.
And that's exactly it. So, and that's the good thing about questioning themselves. But we also don't want questioning ourselves to death, because I always say, and the problem is everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
And if you question yourselves, again, especially with law enforcement, those questions can never end. I would have shot the hand. I would have shot the leg. Why didn't they do this? Why? You know what? You had literally 3 seconds to make a decision.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, again, within law enforcement, again, you have literally 3 seconds to make a decision. Go ahead. Like boom, boom, boom. That's 1, 2, 3. You don't have the luxury of time and sitting back. So when you question yourself, the follow-up aspect is to say, you know what? You're a good human being. You did what you could with the 3 minutes, with the 3 seconds that you had, right? You didn't have the luxury of time and watching videos and analyzing the whole incident, right? So that is why the follow-up becomes quite an essential part of this. Also, it helps convey maybe this person needs further help. The psychological first aid is not being good enough. And at this point, we need to do a referral to a professional, to a mental health professional, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a social worker that is going to be able to further take that on. Because sometimes within psychological first aid, same thing with physical first aid. Maybe I'll put the Band-Aid on. The next day I check, it's still bleeding. Now you need to go get stitches, right? So same with this one. The follow-up now could say, maybe this person needs further help.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you ever correlate or work on cases with, psychologists or social health workers, or
we have them on our we have them on our teams, and they are an integral part of the team, and they don't take on clients that they work with as psychological first aid. That would be unethical. But we have a list that we work with psychologists that do work with first responders usually, that we refer people to. So yes, we do work with professionals that do specialize in that.
Adib, what differences have you seen in the pre-COVID-19 world and the post-COVID-19 world?
First, I'll start off with the stats, actually. The ability to cope before and after, and this is numbers wise, and this is coming from Johns Hopkins University, is threefold. People have their ability to cope has went down threefold, believe it or not. So when people were at 15% of bad coping, now they're at 45%. So people are no longer able to cope much. What used to be normal before is no longer normal. What used to be acceptable. So the COVID-19 has really, again, and I'm sure you've talked about this with others, there's the pre-COVID world and the post-COVID world. So it has really changed the way people connect with each other. A lot of the resources, the resources that we said before, maybe friends, maybe those friends no longer accept company anymore. People don't have dinners like they used to. So a lot of these things that were normal before are no longer as we go on. So it has really pushed our society to a different world. And this is almost, again, this is the beginning of it. This is not, we're only 2 years post-COVID. So there is some research, but it's still evolving. But even within my world, it's kind of interesting because we never got to shut down. Law enforcement never got to shut down during COVID.
Yeah.
So we never got to stay home, right? We were at the front lines, and that by itself causes something else. And this is for people who are really compassionate, something called compassion fatigue. So for people who genuinely care, the nurses, the people who are the givers, right? The spiritual leaders, eventually they hit a point, what's called compassion fatigue, which is no different than PTSD, actually. And they get so burnt out and so tired of caring that they almost begin not to care. And
Yeah, I see what
does
you're
that make
saying.
sense?
And
So,
they need the support now. They've
and that
exhausted themselves.
and that is a big one. So their battery gets so drained, and COVID-19 pushed that to the limits for those professions, that their ability to kind of evolve from that has been even tougher. And again, because people kind of question their motives or their loyalty, even, right? Like, who are you know what I mean? Like, it's all a lot of doubters came out during COVID. Again, I'll say this: everybody's an armchair quarterback, right? I could sit there and say, "Well, you did this and you did that," and not realizing what was happening.
Do you feel that we are ever going to return back to the lower stress levels of the pre-COVID world? Do you believe?
My personal opinion is no, and that's because the evolution of. I used to always be, the positive thinking. Every older generation thinks this younger generation is different. But like I said earlier, the phones, the social media, this has been a real game changer. This has influenced the world in a way that I was talking about this to my son actually the other day, and I'm going to go off a little bit off topic for a second.
That's totally fine.
But even the internet, like the internet's really still really young. The internet, look at the way the internet has changed our life in 25 years. In 25 years.
It's you could say it's a 25-year to 30-year technology, and it's only has been in mass use for maybe 20 years.
Yeah, and if you don't have internet anymore, you can't get a passport. You like literally you can do you rent a car. It changed and this is in a short period of time. Imagine the next 20 years. So are things gonna
Exponential growth, yeah,
oh my
technological
God.
growth as
And
well. Yeah,
that curve I think is about to get even steeper.
yeah.
Some people say, well, I'm like, we have not peaked with that. I think it's about to get actually a lot steeper. And again, I'll go back to psychology for a second. Our bodies have not evolved. We still have the same body as 100,000 years ago, believe it or not. Our bodies are the exact same bodies.
Yeah.
So think about that. So what's happening is we're getting dopamine. We're not supposed to get this much dopamine and this much cortisol into our bodies. And these chemicals, although they're great and they're fun and they make us feel good, we're not supposed to have this much pleasure in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
So what's happening is our bodies are becoming really confused and it's going so physical and psychological. I think it's going to get a lot tougher, actually, a lot quicker. The one light I see is mental health has become a lot more accepted. It's a lot more talked about. People are more accepting of help. People do seek help a lot more. So to me, those kind of, for every negative, there is a positive. And for that, again, talking about mental health, here we are talking about mental health. I've had my own mental health struggles. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have admitted that. Yeah. Right. So now people are able to kind of talk about that a lot more openly. I have a lot of friends who have PTSD and they openly tell me about their PTSD. Yeah. We actually search psychologists. Oh, which one is good, right? You remember before you share which family doctor is good? Now we share psychologist.
Which psychologist is good? That's interesting. Yeah. You bring up an amazing. Go ahead. I'll let you.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
You bring up a very interesting point in that with the exponential growth of technology, our human bodies are now being used at a much higher capacity than ever before in history. And it's like, are we slowing down to think whether we can handle it? You know what I mean? We're burning out and wearing out possibly faster than ever before.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because, like I said, we've never lived like this before. And again, as humans, we're social creatures. But what's happening with technology is we're not becoming social creatures anymore. We are shutting down, right? I could communicate over a text or over a video, but that is not social interaction. Believe it or not, they say humans actually, the hearts can feel each other within 15 feet or something. There's again, I don't know if it's a true study or not, but I personally almost believe it because what happens when you sit with people you love? Right?
You have a really good feeling.
Right? So yeah. I truly like, so what's happened now? Go to a coffee shop. It's actually sad because you'll go to a coffee shop and everybody's sitting on a laptop.
I know. I see sometimes like I walk into a room and everyone is on their phone.
Yeah.
Or into the lunchroom. I walk into work in the lunchroom and everyone's on their phone. And then I say to myself, man, like humanity has a social aspect. We're meant to know each other,
And I'm not picking on you here, but even like you got the headphones on, go for a walk. Everybody's got the
Yeah.
headphones on. I know
Yeah.
right now
Yeah.
we're doing
Yeah.
the podcast,
Yeah.
but you'll see everybody's got their headphones on, and
Yeah.
you can't even say hi to anybody anymore. And it's funny.
Yeah.
I go to actually a physical gym, and I was there this morning, and 90% of the people at the gym wear headphones. I don't actually. It's funny. I don't because I have a couple of friends that we chit chat about physical fitness and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's funny that the majority of the people have headphones on.
Yeah.
And
I
again,
enjoy the social aspect just as much as the
well,
physical
and that's
working
it.
out
But that's
aspect. Yeah.
and this thing is, it's funny. Walk up to somebody and say, "How are you?"
Yeah.
and see their reaction. And it's like, there's a guy I follow on YouTube, and he actually goes around and he asks people, "Are you happy?" And you kind of see the look on their face, and it's, nobody talks to, they're like, no, they're not happy. And it's like, why? Because I have no friends. And isn't that sad that,
Yeah.
people, again, if a million of us have no friends, well, let's be friends with each other, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of,
It's unfortunate. Yeah.
it is unfortunate. And again, so that was almost a form of resilience and psychological body armor for us. And so I'm kind of bringing the conversation back. But now we're losing that. So I had a rough day. I had a traumatic event happen to me. I could call Sid, hey, Sid, can we go for a drive and not talk?
Yeah.
A lot of people now don't have that. So what they're going to do, they're going to come home and they're going to TikTok and they're going to YouTube and they're going to do the Netflix and they're going to they're not even going to go out. They're going to do DoorDash and they're going to so they're not even having that interaction of getting up, getting dressed and going out to get the food anymore.
Especially with young people, this has become a concern with younger generations, and they've even done studies on Facebook how people react. This person liked my post and didn't. Like you get stuck in this almost wanting acceptance of this state. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Exactly. You need that dopamine rush from just the
Yeah.
likes and
Yeah.
from the clicks and the messages. Like, guess what happens when you get a text? Again, we're just as guilty. I'm sure you're just as guilty. I'm just as guilty. If I get a beep, guess what? I have to check it. I have to check it now. Like it
Yeah.
can't wait, right? How many times I was somebody, oh, I need to take this. This is important, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing is how important. Nothing is important. I'm sorry. Like nothing is important. Again, maybe this is the old guy in me talking. Nothing is important. You choose to prioritize what's important. And to me, that tells me when I'm talking to you and you say this is important, that means I'm not important to you. And that affects us subconsciously, actually. But again, nobody's going out, nobody's interacting, nobody's talking. People, like I said, you go somewhere, right? You order online and the order comes to you. Like, how sad is that? Like, what happened to the service? Again, I'm gonna vent for a second. My parents ran a grocery store in the 90s. We knew our customers' names. We knew what, your kids, your family. Our customers we were almost like the neighborhood pub. Like people would come in and visit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that feeling, hey? That
Yes.
old school mom and pop shop type,
Yeah.
all your clientele and everything. It's so
Yeah.
different than today. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny and sad because go anywhere now. Hi, $1.50. See, that's it. Have a good day. Like
Yeah.
it's so robotic. Like it's hi there. Did you find everything you need? Have a good day. It's very robotic. Like, no, how are you? And it's almost funny if somebody's really friendly to you, you will become defensive now. Like, why
Yeah.
are you? Like, if
Yeah.
I say, hey, I like your shirt, like, oh,
Is there a
okay.
hidden intention behind it?
Yeah, like, and it's kind of funny and sad that that's happening, but that also affects who we are as people because what before was, oh, well, instead of saying thank you, now we become defensive and it changes again. It changes in our psyche and
Yeah.
what's happening with us.
Oh, yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And like sometimes I'll go into, you go to a restaurant to eat, right? Um, I'm used to, I like the servers that come up to you and they really make you feel welcome. They take
Oh,
their time, they're talking to you, they're friendly, they're answering your questions. You know what I mean? And then sometimes you walk in and it's like you're not there and thinking to yourself, what happened? What happened to the world? Where is the, welcome, my house is
yeah,
your house type of thing. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Or hi, my name is this. What's cool? I always say I want to. Have you ever seen these ones in the U.S.? They're rude restaurants. They're rude on purpose. I'm like, I want to go there so I can get some human interaction, right? Like they'll make fun of you. They'll say, "Here's the kids' menu," but I'm like, exactly. Like it's so robotic. You'll go into a restaurant. Hi there. They bring you your drink. They bring you your food. 2 minutes later, how's your food? You know what? It's not genuine. It's become just this robotic aspect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of, and once in a while, again, I recently had a great experience. So I'm not going to beat up on everybody, but it's kind of funny. Like the fact that I had one great experience in the past couple of years, and like, like they kind of screwed up our order, and so the manager comes out and he's like, the guy in the back couldn't read, so he put pork, and I know you're Muslim and you can't eat this stuff, and we're laughing. I'm like, oh my god, thank you.
Yeah.
I needed this. I
It's the way
needed
you
this.
deal with it, right? It's the way they deal with it that makes the whole, even if they make a mistake, if they
Yeah,
deal with it in a beautiful way, it's as if it never happened. That's what it's
yeah,
about, the experience, right?
yeah. So it kind of was interesting that way, but it's kind of funny and sad that we've become very robotic, and almost in every field, everything is so structured.
Yeah.
And again, I say we're not robots; we're human beings. It's almost we've lost humanity. Yes, things are more efficient; they work a lot better. And again, people say, "Oh, people are living longer and all that stuff," but we've lost that humanity
Yeah,
touch.
but there's something missing about the humanity. You're right, about the social aspect of it. I mean, this takes me back. I remember growing up in my teenage years, every single day, hours and hours, I was outside, every single day, outside, playing with friends, large groups of friends,
Yeah.
and big groups of friends. We'd play hockey, baseball, wrestling. And we'd play outside and inside, whether it's video games and outside, you're playing sports. And then I look today and I don't see that. I don't
Well,
see large groups of the same
well,
people like playing together like that. Like I feel blessed to have had that.
big question. And I ask this to a lot of people. How many people know their neighbors anymore? How many people have
Yeah.
been inside their neighbor's house?
Yeah.
Even if you know their neighbors, follow up. Have you been inside your neighbor's house?
Yeah.
And like,
Wow.
no.
Wow.
And it's kind of interesting that I've been living in the same house for 15 years. And again, I don't know. I wave to them. That's
Yeah.
about it. More than a friendly wave.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people had their neighbors were their best friends and their family kind of thing. And now it's become, people tell you they visit family on occasion. We need an appointment to visit family, even, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of gotten away.
Yeah. It's changed. I kind of I know how things are like I'm from Lebanon, so I know how things are like in Lebanon. You live in a village and then you just wake up in the morning, you get yourself ready and you just walk along town, you see people outside having coffee, you sit with them, you knock on random doors, everybody's welcoming. It's not like that anymore in today's society, but there's something about that I love. The randomness and the humanity of it is something that I love. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Although I'm gonna share something funny that I saw recently. I mean, is it said, "I wish my kids would walk in the door, open the fridge, eat something, and lay on the couch and watch TV." I'm like, I'm 46 and I still do that to my parents every day. So this is I wish. I'm like, oh, my parents have that pleasure every day.
Yeah. Adib, we're approaching the 1 hour mark. I wanted to ask you, in closing, how what is your outlook on life? What is it that motivates you? What is it that keeps you going? And where do you see yourself heading towards?
I'm very positive. I do believe it's a positive outlook. It's working hard, dedication. Like I said, I joke around that I've been in prison for a long time, but on the good side, uh, honestly, be positive. Motivate yourself to be better today than you were yesterday. I'm going to be better tomorrow, and be kind. Honestly, those are the small things. You don't know what people are going through. The smile, the wave. You may not receive anything in return, and you might put 100% and only get 20% back. Be good just because you're good, not because they're good.
I'm fully with you
Uh,
on that.
so honestly, it is that it is have faith, in a greater power. It doesn't have to be, anything specific, but truly, it's those small things that kind of go a long way. Have some meaningfulness. When you drink a cup of tea, don't watch YouTube. Enjoy that cup of tea. Really think about the tea. Think about the tree grower. I always, what I mean, that appreciate that cup of tea. And last, the big one is gratitude. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful that you live in a great world with the lights, with a push of a button, lights come on and heat comes on. We have luxuries that's, 100 years ago, we live better than the world's richest man ever lived, right? We
That's
live better
true.
than Napoleon ever did. So to have that gratitude and be good, like I said, be good, be kind, because again, you don't know what people are going through, especially psychological trauma. It's my passion, it's my love. It's a lot of people are struggling. It just, if you build that relationship, they'll talk to you, they'll reach out to you. If I could kind of throw in a couple of plugins for myself, as I am on all social networks, so if people want to reach out to me, please feel free to send a message, even if you just want to talk on Messenger or anything. I have no problem with that. So please, we lose a couple of quick crazy stats about suicide. 1 million people die from suicide every year. That
Wow.
that is a lot of people.
Is that a US statistic or a
Well, that's a
worldwide?
worldwide stat. That's a worldwide stat.
Holy smokes, yeah.
But then the
That's
people who are self-harm and struggle with mental health are way more than that. So let's end the stigma. Let's not bury any more bodies. Let's be there for each other. Let's kind of help. Let's just listen. Let's be kind.
I'm fully with you on that, Adib.
So no, on that note, I think thank you for giving me the time and the platform. People probably don't know that we're close friends, but honestly, when you said we're close to an hour, I'm like, no way, we're close to 4 minutes probably. So
Yeah, I think we're a few minutes off, but Adib, I really appreciate that you joined me, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. And hopefully, we can do it again in the future.
I look forward to it, Sid.
Thank you very much, Adib.
Thank you.
Take care, man.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.